For years, ABBA fans believed they knew everything about Benny Andersson and Agnetha Faltskog's legendary partnership. But just recently, Benny dropped a revelation no one saw coming. His latest admission about Agnetha has left fans stunned. Was their relationship more than just music? Stay tuned to uncover the shocking truth. Benny Andersson has spent decades crafting music, but in a recent reflection on ABBA's journey, one name kept surfacing: Agnetha Faltskog. Their collaboration shaped some of the most iconic songs in music history. But what Benny revealed about her has left fans speechless. For years, their relationship seemed to be just another partnership in a successful band. They wrote music, performed together, and delivered hit after hit. But Benny's latest comments suggest there was more beneath the surface. He spoke of Agnetha not just as a singer, but as a force that transformed his own artistry. Fans always saw the polished performances, but behind the scenes, things were far more complicated. Benny admitted that their dynamic wasn't always easy. There were moments of tension, creative clashes, and emotional highs and lows. Yet through it all, there was an undeniable connection. Now, decades later, Benny is opening up in ways he never has before. His words hint at a truth that was long buried beneath the music and the fame. So what did he really mean, and why is he speaking about it now? Let's take a closer look at how it all began. The early 1970s were a turning point for both Benny and Agnetha. Benny had already established himself with the Hep Stars, a Swedish pop group that had seen significant success. Meanwhile, Agnetha was making a name for herself as a solo artist, her hauntingly beautiful voice capturing the attention of industry insiders. When they met, it wasn't just a casual introduction. It was the spark of something much bigger. Both had ambitious dreams, but neither expected that their collaboration would redefine popular music. From the moment they started working together, the chemistry was undeniable. Benny later admitted that he wasn't just looking for a talented singer. He was searching for someone who could challenge him. Agnetha did exactly that. She wasn't afraid to push back, to add her own emotional depth to the music, and to bring a fresh perspective. But creative chemistry can be a double-edged sword. While their partnership led to extraordinary music, it also led to tension. They had different approaches, different ways of working, and different expectations. Still, neither of them could deny that together, they were capable of something truly special. What started as a simple collaboration quickly became something far more complex. Benny Andersson was known for his perfectionism in the studio. He demanded the best. Every note, every lyric, every harmony had to be flawless. He wasn't one to settle for good enough. Agnetha, on the other hand, brought a deep emotional sensitivity to every song she performed. Her voice had a way of capturing pain and joy simultaneously, creating an unmistakable sound that set ABBA apart from other bands of the time. But this drive for perfection wasn't always easy. Benny pushed Agnetha harder than most, expecting her to deliver vocals that carried the full weight of emotion. He knew her potential, but at times, the pressure was overwhelming. Some sessions were grueling, lasting for hours as Benny fine-tuned every detail. Agnetha, though incredibly talented, sometimes felt exhausted by the constant pursuit of musical excellence. And yet, those very struggles led to some of ABBA's greatest hits. Looking back, Benny now acknowledges how much he relied on Agnetha's talent. Without her, their music wouldn't have had the same emotional depth. He admits that he didn't always realize just how much she shaped ABBA's sound until years later. But the music wasn't the only thing taking its toll. Fame was too. ABBA's rise to international fame was meteoric. The band went from being a Swedish sensation to one of the biggest names in the world. But for Agnetha, the attention wasn't always welcome. She once described fame as feeling trapped in a glass box, watched by millions yet isolated in her own struggles. And nonstop travel drained her. While she remained graceful in public, behind the scenes, she struggled with the overwhelming exposure. Benny, though more reserved, saw what was happening. He wasn't as affected by the limelight, preferring the quiet work of composing and producing. But he couldn't ignore how fame was impacting Agnetha. It's a long process, but the thing is, if I'm not doing it, nothing is going to happen. There were moments when the pressure of stardom threatened to break her. She longed for normalcy, for a life beyond ABBA. Benny, in his recent reflections, admitted that he didn't fully understand just how difficult it was for her at the time. Still, the band kept going. The music had to be made, the performances had to continue. But beneath the polished exterior, cracks were beginning to show, and soon, the weight of it all would become too much to ignore. As ABBA reached new heights of fame, their personal lives began to unravel. Agnetha's marriage to Bjorn was deteriorating, and the strain of constantly working together only made things worse. At the same time, Benny's relationship with Annie Frid was also falling apart. The band that had built its success on love and harmony was now struggling with heartbreak behind the scenes. But rather than letting their personal pain tear the band apart immediately, they channeled it into their music. Their songs became more introspective, filled with themes of loss, longing, and separation. Benny later admitted that the emotional turmoil was both a burden and a source of inspiration. Some of ABBA's most powerful songs were written during this period, including The Winner Takes It All, a song that fans still believe was deeply personal for Agnetha. Despite the emotional toll, the band kept moving forward. But the tensions, both personal and professional, were impossible to ignore, and eventually, everything came to a breaking point. After ABBA disbanded in the early 1980s, Benny and Agnetha went their separate ways. For years, they had little to no contact. Fans speculated about their relationship. Was there resentment? Regret? Neither spoke much about it publicly. This song is going to be big because we could feel it. We had goosebumps. Benny focused on new musical projects, while Agnetha stepped away from the spotlight almost entirely. The silence between them left fans with more questions than answers. But now, decades later, Benny is finally opening up about that time. He admits that he didn't fully appreciate Agnetha's influence on ABBA's success until he looked back at it all. He acknowledges that their creative push and pull was essential to the band's identity. Without their dynamic, ABBA wouldn't have been the same. And then came the moment that no one expected, their reunion. When ABBA announced their Voyage album, the world was caught off guard. It had been decades since they had performed together, and for a long time, it seemed like a reunion would never happen. Benny and Agnetha, who had worked so closely in the past, had gone years without speaking much about their time together. But as time passed, something changed. For years, Benny had avoided dwelling on the past. He had moved on to other musical projects. People think that we were better 40 years ago. Fine. He focused on composing for orchestras and writing for theater. Meanwhile, Agnetha had chosen a life away from the public eye, releasing music sporadically but largely keeping to herself. The idea of them ever working together again seemed impossible. But something brought them back. Maybe it was the realization that their music still meant so much to people. Maybe it was unfinished business. Or maybe, just maybe, Benny had started to see their relationship in a new light. When they stepped back into the studio, it was no longer about chasing perfection or dealing with the pressures of the past. This time, it was different. There were no expectations, no deadlines, and no pressure to prove anything. It was just about the music, the thing that had always connected them, even when everything else fell apart. Benny, for the first time, spoke openly about how much he admired Agnetha's artistry. He admitted that her voice had always been the soul of their music. We were the perfect pair, he confessed, even when we didn't know it. For Agnetha, the experience was equally emotional. She had spent years trying to escape the weight of fame. But returning to ABBA after all these years felt different. This time, there was no pressure to be the face of a global phenomenon. Instead, she could just enjoy the process of creating music again. She later reflected on the reunion, saying, "There was a time when I thought I had left it all behind, but something about coming back felt right. We've all changed, and maybe that's why it works now." For fans, seeing Benny and Agnetha back together, older, wiser,